Before you walk into any room today, any meeting, any conversation, any relationship, I need you to understand one brutal truth that no one has the guts to say out loud. The single greatest threat to your success, your peace of mind, and your mental energy is not failure. It's not competition. It's not even your own self-doubt. It's the invisible tax you pay every single day to people who operate without logic, without awareness, and without the faintest idea of the damage they leave behind. And here's what makes it worse. Intelligent people almost always lose this war, not because they're weaker, but because they fight it wrong. They argue, they explain. They try to reason with minds that were never built for the conversation. Today, that stops. Because what separates truly high-functioning individuals from everyone else isn't their IQ. It's their operating system for navigating human chaos without losing themselves in it. There is a moment, and every intelligent person knows this moment intimately, where you are standing in the middle of a conversation, fully aware that the person across from you is wrong, not slightly wrong, not debatably wrong, completely, demonstrably, almost impressively wrong, and everything inside you wants to correct it. Your brain has already loaded the evidence. Your mouth is ready. You can see the entire logical path from their error to the truth, and it would take you maybe 45 seconds to walk them through it. But here is what experience, real, hard-earned experience, eventually teaches you. Those 45 seconds will turn into 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes will drain something out of you that no amount of sleep will fully restore. And at the end of it, they will not be convinced. They will be louder. This is the trap, and intelligent people fall into it more than anyone else, precisely because of their intelligence. They believe on some deep level that logic is universal, that if you construct a clear enough argument, present clean enough evidence, and speak with enough patience, the other person will eventually arrive at the truth alongside you. It is one of the most expensive assumptions a smart person can carry, because logic is only as powerful as the mind that receives it. And when you are dealing with someone who is not operating from reason, who is operating from ego, from emotion, from deeply fixed patterns of thinking, your logic does not land as information. It lands as a threat. And threats do not produce agreement. They produce defense. They produce escalation. They produce the very stubbornness you are trying to dissolve. Intelligent people who have truly mastered human dynamics understand something that takes most people decades to learn. Engagement is a resource. Attention is a resource. Emotional bandwidth is a resource. And like every resource, it is finite. Every argument you enter, every correction you attempt, every debate you allow yourself to be pulled into with someone who is never going to change their mind, that is a withdrawal from an account that does not replenish easily. You feel it after. The fatigue that is not physical, the irritation that lingers longer than it should, the faint sense that you spent something valuable and got nothing in return. That is not just frustration. That is the measurable cost of misallocated mental energy. The decision to disengage is not passive. That is the part most people misunderstand completely. They see disengagement as avoidance, as cowardice, as someone backing down from a fight they could have won. But disengagement from a pointless exchange is one of the most active, deliberate, and disciplined choices a person can make. It requires you to override the ego. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood, of letting an incorrect statement stand in the room unchallenged, of walking away when every instinct is telling you to turn back around. That is not weakness. That demands a level of self-control that most people will never develop, because most people are still slaves to the need to be right out loud. There is a deeper layer to this that rarely gets talked about. When you consistently engage with low-quality thinking, you do not just lose energy, you begin to absorb the patterns. Prolonged exposure to irrational arguments, circular logic, and emotionally driven reasoning starts to reshape the way you process information without you even noticing it. You find yourself becoming more reactive, more defensive, more likely to argue in rooms where you previously would have stayed calm. The people around you do not just take your time. Over time, they begin to take your clarity. And clarity for an intelligent person is everything. It is the thing that separates good decisions from disastrous ones, measured responses from impulsive ones, long-term thinking from short-term reaction. This is why the highest functioning people you will ever encounter share one visible habit. They are extraordinarily selective about where they place their attention. They do not explain themselves to everyone. They do not correct every error they witness. They do not feel compelled to win every exchange. They have made a quiet, firm agreement with themselves that their mental energy belongs to things that move, grow, build, and produce, and that anything outside of that is simply not worth the cost. There is a distinction that most people never make, and the failure to make it is responsible for an enormous amount of wasted time, misplaced compassion, and repeated frustration. It is the distinction between someone who does not know better and someone who has simply decided not to. These two types of people look almost identical on the surface. They say similar things. They make similar mistakes. They produce similar levels of chaos in the rooms they walk into. But underneath the surface, they are operating from completely different places. And if you treat them the same way, you will exhaust yourself trying to help someone who was never asking for help in the first place. Ignorance is a condition. It is the absence of information, exposure, or experience that has not yet arrived. It is entirely correctable. A person who is ignorant of something can be taught, can be shown, can be guided toward a better understanding if they are willing to receive it. There is no malice in ignorance. There is no resistance by design. When you encounter genuine ignorance and you approach it with patience and clear information, something shifts. You can see it. The person absorbs what you are saying, connects it to what they already know, and moves. That movement, however small, is the signal that you are dealing with someone whose limitation is circumstantial, not structural. But chosen stupidity is something else entirely. It is what happens when a person has access to better information, has been exposed to clearer thinking, has been shown the consequences of their patterns, and still returns to the same position. Not because they cannot see the truth, but because seeing it would require them to change something. And change, for certain kinds of people, is more threatening than being wrong. So they choose, consciously or not, to remain exactly where they are. They dismiss evidence. They attack the person presenting the argument instead of the argument itself. They reframe every correction as an attack, every disagreement as disrespect, every attempt at reason as arrogance. This is not ignorance behaving badly. This is a defense system built to protect a version of reality that cannot survive honest examination. Understanding this changes everything about how you respond. When you are dealing with genuine ignorance, patience is an investment. Your time and energy go towards someone who has the capacity to use them. The conversation has a destination. There is a version of this exchange where both people walk away having moved forward. That is worth something. That is worth your effort, your clarity, your willingness to slow down and explain. But when you are dealing with chosen stupidity, patience is not an investment. It is a donation to a cause that has already decided it does not want your contribution. You are not filling an empty container. You are pouring into one that has a hole in it by design. The most dangerous version of this is when chosen stupidity comes wrapped in the appearance of engagement. These are the people who ask questions not to understand, but to delay, who nod while you speak and then repeat the exact same position the moment you finish, who use the language of open-mindedness. I hear what you're saying. That's an interesting point. I'll think about it. While every behavior tells you that no thinking will occur, they have learned that performing receptiveness keeps people engaged longer, keeps the conversation going, keeps you invested in an outcome they were never going to allow. Intelligent people who have not yet learned to identify this pattern will spend enormous amounts of time in these exchanges, always feeling like they are almost getting through, always believing that the next point will be the one that lands. The shift that changes everything is learning to read intent before investing energy. Not cynically, not with the assumption that everyone is operating in bad faith, but honestly, watching whether a person's behavior changes in proportion to the quality of information they receive. Noticing whether they engage with the substance of what you are saying, or whether they consistently redirect to emotion, to distraction, to personal attacks. Asking yourself quietly and without judgment whether this person is limited by what they know or by what they are willing to. Because one of those people deserves your patience and your clarity, and the other one has already made their choice. There is a pattern that plays out in almost every interaction between a highly intelligent person and someone operating far below their level of reasoning. The intelligent person, armed with facts, with logic, with a clear understanding of the situation, enters the exchange fully confident that their intellectual advantage will carry them through. They believe that being right is enough, that having the better argument, the stronger evidence, the cleaner thinking will naturally produce the outcome they want. And then the conversation deteriorates. Not because their facts were wrong, not because their logic failed, but because they made the most common mistake an intelligent person can make. They showed up to an emotional battlefield carrying intellectual weapons and wondered why nothing landed. Intellectual superiority is real. Some people genuinely think more clearly, process information more accurately, and construct better arguments than others. That is not arrogance. That is simply a fact of human variation. But intellectual superiority as a strategy, as something you deploy, display, or lean into during conflict, is one of the least effective tools available to you. Because the moment the person across from you feels intellectually inferior, the conversation is no longer about the topic. It becomes about their dignity, about their need to protect their self-image from the threat your intelligence represents to it. And a person defending their dignity will fight with tools that have nothing to do with logic, with emotion, with escalation, with personal attacks, with stubbornness, so deep it looks almost principled. You cannot out-argue someone who has stopped arguing and started surviving. Emotional detachment operates on a completely different level. It is not distance, it is not coldness, it is not the performance of not caring dressed up as sophistication. Emotional detachment is the deliberate act of removing your ego from the outcome of an interaction. It means you are no longer personally invested in whether the other person agrees with you, validates your position, or walks away changed. You are present in the conversation. You are clear in your thinking. You are honest in your communication, but you are not attached to what they do with any of it. And that single shift changes the entire dynamic of every difficult interaction you will ever have. When you are emotionally detached, you stop reacting and start observing. You notice things that an emotionally invested person completely misses. The pattern behind someone's resistance, the fear underneath their aggression, the insecurity driving their need to dominate the conversation. You see the mechanics of what is happening instead of just experiencing the impact of it. And when you can see the mechanics, you can navigate them. You are no longer inside the storm. You are watching it from a position that gives you actual choices about how to respond, rather than simply firing back at whatever just hit you. This is where intelligent people often confuse detachment with suppression. They think that removing emotion from their response means burying what they feel, that it requires a kind of internal violence where you force yourself not to react while quietly absorbing everything. That is not detachment. That is pressure building inside a sealed container, and it produces explosions that are far more damaging than the original provocation. True detachment is not about what you suppress. It is about what you no longer need. You do not need them to agree. You do not need them to admit you were right. You do not need the room to acknowledge that you handled it better. When those needs are genuinely gone, there is nothing left to suppress, because there is nothing threatening enough to trigger a reaction in the first place. The practical power of this is enormous. A person who cannot provoke you emotionally has almost no leverage over you. The tools that most people use to destabilize others in conflict, the insults, the dismissiveness, the raised voice, the personal attacks, the deliberate misrepresentation of your position, all of those tools require an emotional target to function. Remove the target and every weapon they carry becomes useless in your presence. They escalate and you remain level. They attack and you respond with clarity. They try to pull you into chaos and you simply do not go. not because you are suppressing the urge to engage, but because the urge itself has been replaced by something far more powerful. A genuine indifference to the outcome of their behavior, rooted not in contempt, but in an unshakable understanding of where your actual value resides. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that intelligent, empathetic people carry, and it is different from the tiredness that comes from hard work or difficult circumstances. It is the exhaustion that accumulates from years of trying to help people who never asked to be helped. From investing insight, patience, time, and genuine care into someone who looked at everything you offered and quietly decided they had no use for it. It does not arrive all at once. It builds slowly, conversation by conversation, disappointment by disappointment, until one day you find yourself depleted in a way you cannot fully explain, because from the outside, you were simply trying to do something good. The fundamental error at the center of this exhaustion is one of the most deeply human mistakes a person can make. It is the assumption that because you can see what is wrong, the other person must on some level see it too. That your clarity about their situation translates into their awareness of it. That if you frame it carefully enough, approach it gently enough, choose the right moment and the right words, they will finally recognize the thing you have been trying to show them. And that recognition will become the turning point you have been waiting for. This assumption feels reasonable because it is based on how you work. You are someone who responds to insight. When someone shows you a blind spot, something in you moves toward it. You correct, you adjust, you grow. And because that is your internal experience, you project it onto others as if it were universal. It is not. Some people have constructed an entire identity around the version of themselves that does not need fixing. Every flaw, every pattern, every destructive habit has been integrated into a self-concept that depends on those things remaining exactly as they are. The chaos they create is not incidental to who they are. It is load-bearing. Remove it, and the whole structure of how they understand themselves begins to collapse. So when you arrive with your observations, your gentle challenges, your carefully delivered truths, you are not offering them growth. You are threatening their architecture, and people do not thank you for threatening the building they live in, no matter how badly that building needs to come down. This is what makes the situation so disorienting for intelligent people. They can see with complete clarity that the person in front of them is suffering because of patterns they are choosing to maintain. They can trace the direct line from behavior to consequence. They can see the version of this person's life that becomes available the moment certain things change. And that vision feels like something worth fighting for because it is real and because they care. But caring about someone's potential is not the same as having permission to pursue it on their behalf. And pursuing it without permission is not love or intelligence. It is a slow, mutual destruction dressed up as concern. The most important reframe available to you here is this. Your ability to see what someone needs to change is information about your perception, not a responsibility assigned to you. The fact that you can diagnose the problem does not make you the required solution. It does not obligate you to stay in the room until they come around. It does not mean that leaving physically, emotionally, or energetically represents a failure of your character or your compassion. Some of the most intelligent and caring decisions a person can make involve walking away from a situation that has no mechanism for the outcome you are hoping for. There is also something worth examining in the compulsion to fix people who have not asked to be fixed. Often underneath it, there is something that has less to do with the other person and more to do with your own relationship to helplessness. Watching someone you care about remain stuck in patterns that are clearly hurting them produces a particular kind of psychological discomfort. And the attempt to fix them is sometimes less about their need and more about your inability to tolerate that discomfort. The fixing becomes a way of managing your own internal state. And when you look at it honestly from that angle, a difficult question emerges. One about who the effort is actually serving, and whether the energy you are pouring outward might be doing something more meaningful if it were redirected somewhere it was actually wanted. There is a quiet but devastating cycle that intelligent people repeat with remarkable consistency when they are dealing with someone whose thinking consistently disappoints them. They have an interaction that goes badly. They feel the frustration of it, process it, and then, because they are intelligent and reflective, they arrive at what feels like a reasonable solution. They decide to expect better next time. They tell themselves that the person now understands the impact of their behavior, that the conversation they just had was enough to shift something, that going forward things will be different. And then the next interaction arrives and nothing is different. And the frustration is not just about what happened. It is compounded by the gap between what they expected and what they received. They are not just dealing with the difficult person. They are dealing with the weight of a broken expectation on top of it.